Hello and welcome to day 130 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlins Nyback. We're here talking about black issues in America, where blacks are going. Are they stagnated? Do they we need help? Um, Today we're talking about government, the Constitution. I think that it's a two-parter here. We're going to do with understanding judicial, legislative, and executive powers here in the government, the three branches, which we may find that these three branches may not be the way the Constitution uh, says America is supposed to operate, with these three branches exchanging powers and whatnot. We'll talk about the history of how, you know, this dynamic occurs, and it's very important though for especially today, May 2019, because there's a lot of posturing, they're digging in heels, there's subpoenas, and there's refusing to testify, and there's words of contempt and impeachment, a lot of abrasive political rhetoric, uh, divisions down party lines, the two major parties, Democrats and Republicans. And we're going to just, I kind of like, I think what we're getting at is in a thematic way here in this forum is where we look especially at history, but we're seeing how this country has gone through some metamorphosis, we'll say, consistently over time on some issues. And it's ironic, we can trace it back, something I said, I think a while ago, a few months ago, you take history and it's like fireworks and big, grand things happening, but there's no connection. We find no context, little context going on, little logical context when we go and really dissect the minutia of what's happening historically in America. But then we take out our big brush called slavery and we start going across it, and we sort of finish it. If you're familiar with Bob Ross, you could go Google him and YouTube him, plenty of stuff out there, I'm sure. When he finishes a painting, he pulls out this big old brush and he just goes across, and it really blends things together. It makes the picture so much more realistic, and that's what we do. That's what slavery is. It's a big brush to make sense of what's going on in America. Uh, Two thoughts emerge. First thought has two parts. First part is that slavery brush. Not only does it help us apply and to understand history in America, uh, but as the slave mind continued, is it still an integral part of keeping this country alive and running? Second part of that first thought, we're talking about the mind here, various geists in America. The second thought is does the white mind, uh, that prevailing feelings of entitlement and whatnot, does that prevail in America? Are they uh, intuitively passing on uh, ideas of success to their children, values that make them successful, that have an expectation of favor based on their color? White is a color. Now, my second thought is for concern for financial literacy. And not just that, we have financial literacy. Do you understand leverage? buying a home, renting home, what those versus is the home asset or liability, what is an asset, what is a liability, oh, business entities and structures, and on and on. Financial literacy is a whole big thing. It's more than saving money in the bank. You know, I got this little bank account. They make me put $5 away. It's a actually futile exercise, and those dollars lose value enormously because I understand inflation, poor interest rates, and stuff like that. So you know that's another big piece of financial literacy. There's also political literacy, voting rights, executive, judicial, legislative branches, how they work together, all this stuff. Political literacy. Oh, we can do carpentry literacy. How do you build a home? You know, what's the language of building a space out of wood from scratch? Okay, that kind of thing. Baking literacy. You know, um, more of a science than just frying chicken. Okay, so literacy is a concern of mine. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Read 3 of his works, and uh, it was the timing was good because I was consistently coming up against some issues in America that we're going to talk about today. Uh, I couldn't articulate it. No one could understand what I was complaining about, ranting about. But this man, he's been at it for a long time here in America. Uh, I'm not surprised that his message it gets to me, and like it's a challenge to get at what he's saying and being heard. But now that the floodgates are open, I found them all over the place. You can find them on YouTube. I read 3 of his works. First work, A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We are referencing this work today in our 2-parter concerning the Supreme Court, which is a subject getting more and more attention as our legislative and executive branch of government keep butting heads and find disharmony. 2 other works, very important works, and I want you to get these books as well. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and the Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C. Behind me, you see the hashtag #US2 symbol. You find Black women supporting each other and discussing their issues there. Try Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook, more Black support. And if you found me here on World Wide Web, YouTube, you are technologically literate and you can find your community and flavor and argument here because it's the information age. Also, we have story time occasionally, and we're ramping this up. Uncle Tom's Cabin. Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work, mid-1800s. This is pre-Civil War, very important book, banned in the South for obvious reasons. I have finished that book, but we just go and review. I take racial change, set racial change on my lap, and we have story time occasionally. I'm going to get right into this 2-parter. The question, we're coming out of Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We're at question 21. Does the Supreme Court have the constitutional power to overrule Congress in Black civil rights issues? And we're going to just pick through Dr. Anderson's argument and see what the answer to that question comes out to be. We'll find out. We'll really have a better idea tomorrow. Today, we're going to just lay some foundation because it's very dense reading there, and I'm becoming sensitive. Just don't want to breeze by in the 10 to 15 minutes, 20 minutes max that we have for the material after I get done running my mouth and getting out of the way. All right, with that question, I want to start out with let's talk political literacy. I did a voting piece. We did a big series recently, 26 straight days of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, their lives, their thoughts, their relationship to God with slavery, um, their personal histories, things like that. Understanding those things can help us get an idea of why we are sitting here today, why you are interested in a video of some crazy guy. No, Tomlin's Nyback is not my real name. That's a little play on words. I'm just fooling around, entertaining myself with something. Uh, but the political literacy, how's the government work? Why does it work? I work nights, so when I come home, I look at CNN, and as I keep my sanity, because all the news is bad and challenging, but I get to see that as a blue collar person working, I've worked mostly in the day and throughout my life, and like so much is going on in the world and in America. Decisions are being made that impact me financially, socially, and all these things. Uh, while I'm toiling and sweating at some job for 40 hours a week, it's amazing what what is happening. So, but now I get to watch CNN. I got more interested in political issues, more motivated to vote. I'm not a big voter, and so my complaints. They say if you don't vote, you really can't complain, which I don't care. This is America. We complain anyway. But political literacy is very important. Um, the Supreme Court, three responsibilities of the court are mentioned in page 66 in Dr. Anson's book. And they are to decide appeals from trials held in lower courts, and we're pretty familiar with that. You know, we know the escalation things. Abortion is a big one. Civil rights, big bang. We'll say 1954 Brown v. Board of Education goes out to the Supreme Court, because the lower courts, they just passed the buck, and we're going to talk about that too a little bit. This something that is implied in this section is how people, if it's a hot potato, you'll find these groups and committees passing the buck, but they pass the buck, and power moves around. In this case, the Supreme Court received some power, but they held it and amplified this power we're going to talk about. So that's the one. Decide appeals from trials held in lower courts. And he's coming out of the Constitution itself properly. I should have come with a constitutional quote that says that. I may write a little note to myself. Hopefully I can stumble onto this before tomorrow's. Second, get involved in the appointment of ambassadors, and finally, and which I don't hear much about. um, Ironically, I don't. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things the government's doing, but ambassadorships around the globe, we don't hear much about that in the news. Definitely not on CNN, or that the Supreme Court is involved in any way with the ambassadors, we find that's probably left more to the executive branch, the people in the White House. And then they're to rule in cases, and this is a big one, in which a federal official failed to carry out their duties. And that's some of the problems with the arguments today with Barr and Mueller, all these big um, attorney general people, stuff like that. You know, it's coming to the point um, where the Supreme Court is this close to getting involved, stepping in, and hearing some of these major cases. Now, where did the Supreme Court, though? The Supreme Court is bigger than that today, right? From the Constitution and things like that, and some interesting points. Remember, the fireworks of history. 1803. Let's go back to. Um, there was a Marbury versus Madison decision. It had to do with John Adams. He's appointing um, federal people as he's leaving office. Thomas Jefferson's coming in and resisting those appointments, and um, it comes to a heated debate, and it's argued, but they take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rules on that decision, stripping Congress of the power to elect these government officials. Go ahead and Google the exact, the specifics of the Marbury versus Madison decision, 1803. But the point is, this was one of the first instances of the Supreme Court having some power. They said what was going on was unconstitutional and took that power away from Congress. And since that time, that was one of the landmark decisions. Since that time, the Supreme Court has just grown and grown in its scope of influence and power, where if something goes to the Supreme Court today, their decision is final. There's no other place to go after the Supreme Court rules on something going on in America. Millions of lives are impacted. The whole world is impacted, in a sense, when the Supreme Court finally lays down that gavel. But no more arguments. It's over. You can appeal, whatever. You almost have to get a transfer of the guard. You got to get one of the justices to die, because that's a post they hold for life once they're in there. So you got to wait for a justice to die, or retire once. There is a limit. You don't just wait till they fall over in the chair. But the idea, once they're done with their power, that's the last job post they'll ever have. Then the dynamic changes, and you get a lot of reverberations through the nation. Oh, is it going to be somebody liberal, conservative, for abortion, against, pro, con, this and that? Because once that individual is seated, you can't get them out. So this 1803 Marbury versus Madison decision was when the Supreme Court overruled Congress. 54 years later, famous Dred Scott decision. If you remember, we mentioned this a couple times, went into it in depth, I believe, in one post. Slave went to a free state, and then it came back to a slave state, and the slave argued, along with a whole lot of help, I'm sure, probably a lot of abolitionist thinkers, that when he left, you know, the slave South and went to free North, that he became free. His, you know, his being in a physical space changed his status. Well, the Supreme Court said no, and further, the Supreme Court, in regards to black folks, it said a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Now, that's an important decision. That's a systemic ruling since 1857, embedded in the lifeblood of this institution we call America. And I say that because I found in my life, this was one of those things I wasn't able to articulate in the world. I got a neighbor, you know, uh, can't sing, can't play music worth a damn. And, you know, one day he's trying to play some guitar, but it was very loud and obnoxious. I knocked on his door. I said, hey, you know, I politely told him, you know, that I get it. I'm a musician, so I get it. And that some of it's payback for me making that kind of noise in close communities. Uh, well, now he slithers by me like a wormy snake. Doesn't give me eye contact, like, you know. And my sense, I'm getting a sense right from this text, right from this Supreme Court ruling, 1857, something in the, you know, it's intertwined in the fabric of the nation that, you know, a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect, you know. So I mean, it's real. This is in the workplace where I've tried to express some of my stuff, things, and it's like I'm not being uppity, or I'm not trying to make somebody's life harder. I'm pointing out things we can fix, things that make stuff go better. But the white folks didn't think of it, or maybe I'm doing something without their permission, and all hell's breaking loose. I used to work I love working with dogs. I love little animals and stuff. But this guy, we had moved this doggy daycare to a new space, and you know, it's not the best part of town where we worked anyway. And so he has this nice lock, big old chunk of steel. Now it's very heavy. It's kind of valuable to scrappers. I used to do a little bit of that stuff on the side when I was heavily drinking and doing a lot of cocaine. You know, go through alleys, you get scrap, take it to a place, they weigh it, and you get a few dollars, right? So anyway, this lock, you know, I would either bring it in or I lock it on the gate. I'm pretty sure I locked it on the gate most of the time. That would be the sensible thing to do. But he's like, oh, you don't have to lock it on the gate. And I'm like, instead of arguing and saying, dude, somebody's going to take that and sell it. So that's scrap. It's heavy old big lock, you know. Sure enough, a few days later, the thing disappeared. And, you know, the white owner didn't acknowledge my efforts to try to, you know, secure his property. He didn't give me any commentary. He just, you know, it happened, it disappeared, and that was it. You know, you got the young kids on their smartphones all over the place in this same establishment, right? So I bring in my little iPad, so I'm doing my little doodling and stuff like that. I'm the one focused on to say I can't be on a device, right? And the dumbass later on, when we move to the new space, he buys iPads for all the pens and stuff like that. It's just that crazy stuff white folks do. And some of the source of that is right here, you know. And it's not something explicit. They don't teach it in school, but it's one of those things. It's what I say in the beginning about the white mind, expectation of favor, power, entitlement. Is it just an attitude of mind prevailing within white culture, the majority white culture here in America, right? That they are the end, what is right and decision making and stuff like that. It's right here because the Supreme Court, which at that time was populated with slaveholders and um, people that supported slavery, very white. It's not shouldn't be surprised that you know uh, that these white men, were all for the slavery institution. You know. Now, further, this has never been overturned. That a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. And that I'll tell you, like before we can get, I think some of our issues addressed, we need to get some of this constitutional stuff overturned, rewritten, acknowledged, and all that. You know, it took me. I've been on the planet a few decades, and I'm just learning that this kind of language is embedded in the Constitution, embedded as a Supreme Court decision, and these documents are what gird up the nation, you know. And from these documents, they are referred to for precedents. So you find black issues are just a harder struggle, harder thing to navigate, because when these law people put their arguments together, they find these little tidbits, very powerful tidbits, in the source documents of America. Um, you know, the Supreme Court in this, we're arguing that the Supreme Court was given this power back in 1803, Marbury versus Madison, and the Supreme Court just grew in that space. In this instance, it's kind of the waters are a little muddy because the Constitution did not declare black people as people. We were farm implements, farm animals. We were not people. We were 3/5 of a human being, not a full human being. Remember, I think I mentioned that uh, months ago. I was really big on that. So so we got this: a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Black people are 3/5 of a human being. We've got these kind of things to tease out and struggle with. These are the issues that we need to go and fight about, that we need to raise with America, because this lackadaisical, dragging ass attitude about getting black people equal access to the wealth and resources of the nation is just always going to be challenged as long as the Constitution, the supportive documents of the nation, declare that blacks, have no rights, that whites respect, that blacks are 3/5 of a human being, on and on. You know, we got to get that language out of there, and I think then we'll see some change. And to get the language, we need to maybe advocate more political literacy, um, be more proactive in what's being taught in the classrooms. Drive home some of these issues. If they're not going to change, drive it home. Maybe the next generation or two will catch fire, but we know the powers that be don't want us that aware of what's going on. So that's part one today of the Supreme Court's power, whether or not to overrule Congress or not. Tomorrow we'll get more into amendments and things like that. But I just wanted to lay the groundwork. You know, if we've been here, this is day 130. You're not surprised, I'm sure. But we'll find out how Dr. Anderson finishes this argument. Tomorrow, please join me again on Tomlin's Nyback, day 130. 365 days towards racial change. I'll see you tomorrow.